Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So we have from the youngest little Zach Kravitz waving and bouncing along over there, much better than any TV, I'm sure. All these faces are so lovely to look at. All the way to our older members. I must say, Ramsey, wearing that fantastic yarmulke, you look like a great sage. You look like one of the great Rabbonim of old times, looking very sagely. And Michael, lovely to see you as well. Shabbat Shalom to you, Michael. Shabbat Shalom, Ramsey, from the youngest to the more senior, shall we say. At any rate, here we are back again at the beginning of yet another cycle, a cycle of the Torah. And the sages said that there are two passages in the Bible that are so mystical and contain such deep secrets that they cannot be properly interpreted or even understood. One of them is called Ma'aseh Merkavah, the vision of the angelic chariot with which the book of Ezekiel opens. And the other is called Ma'aseh Bereshit, the story of creation with which the Bible begins, and which of course forms the subject of our parsha this week, Parshat Bereshit, that is always read on the first Shabbat following the conclusion of the Torah on Simchat Torah. But despite the inability to plumb the depths of this creation account, there is in fact much moral instruction that can be gleaned from it. The story of mankind begins very inauspiciously with the multiple failings of the human species. Adam and Eve disobey the command of God on the very first day of their existence, and in regard to the very first communication that they receive from the divine. Shortly after that, Cain murders Abel, the first fratricide in the Bible, and the reality is it's all a bit depressing and certainly doesn't augur very well for mankind. But concealed in this narrative, there is also a message of hope. In the verse that precedes the serpent's seduction, we learn the following. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, Adam and Eve, of course. V'lo yitboshashu, and they were not ashamed. The Hebrew word bosh, v'lo yitboshashu, the Hebrew word bosh means ashamed or embarrassed. In modern Hebrew, if you want to describe if you describe a situation as a busha, you'll say it's an embarrassment, it's a disgrace, busha. It's common Hebrew language. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch finds the same word used, but in an entirely different context much later on in the Torah. Moses has been up on the mountain to receive the Torah for 40 days. The people are getting anxious. There's been an error in the counting, and they believe that he is over time and that he is not going to return. And that, of course, is what leads them to build the golden calf. But the verse reads over there, and the people saw, Ki boshesh Moshe laredet min hahar. The verse translates as the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain. But the word for delayed is ki boshesh. And that's exactly the same word that we've had, v'lo yitboshashu. But here it means delayed, not ashamed. The people had an expectation that Moses would descend from the mountain, and when his descent was delayed, the situation felt short of their expectation. So at a first glance, there's no connection between the word bosh in these two verses. Back in our story, v'lo yitboshashu means that they were not ashamed, embarrassed. Later on, in the story of the golden calf, the same word means delayed. But Rabbi Hirsch sees a profound connection between shame and expectation, and one that actually turns out to be the very salvation of mankind. Shame, says Rabbi Hirsch,
look at them.
Is the feeling, Lewis, just need to mute, please. There, I've muted you. Shame, Rabbi Hirsch says, is the feeling of one who has fallen short, hasn't come up to the expectations of himself or herself. When someone hasn't attained that which he or she should be, when he or she feels that they're not what they ought to be, that person feels ashamed of himself. You see, God knew that human beings would often fall short of what they were meant to be or could be. So he gave us a gift, possibly the greatest gift of all, a consciousness of our own shortcomings and a sense of disappointment for having failed. So in other words, he made human beings their own monitors and guardians. He implanted in every human being the ideal by which to judge oneself. We call this gift conscience. In Hebrew, it's called bush, shame. And these feelings should not dishearten or discourage us. On the contrary, they should be celebrated as a priceless asset which constantly spurs us to grow and to improve and to achieve and to work towards maximizing our potential and accomplishing that which we've been brought into the world to accomplish. You see, there's something rather wonderful about a GPS in a motor car. When you've made a wrong turn, instead of chiding you, a lady's voice very quietly and calmly offers you the correct way to go, the way to correct your error. And it doesn't matter how many wrong turns you make, that voice never loses its cool because the software is programmed to help us to reach a destination. And it'll get you there so long as you don't give up and go home. That's GPS. And the same moral compass has been built into human beings. We intuitively know the right way. And if we veer off track, our inner GPS is the one that guides us back. So at face value, the stories that we read are ones of failure. But the subtext of these stories is the gift God has invested in human creation to self-correct and ultimately to triumph. Shabbat Shalom.